thank you for your support. I'm very honored to address you today. Thank you for your warm welcome words, Mr. President, Your Excellencies, Senators. We do know you. Thank you for supporting us. I'd like to thank all the professorial community, students at the university. So, dear friends, I'm glad to welcome you. Thank you for your interest in and attention to Ukraine. I watched the video, a nice one, made wholeheartedly about Ukraine. Quite a tragic one, beautiful yet tragic, but you saw it yourselves. No more comments. How to assess it? What are the details of it? I think it will be possible for us during the Q&A session. I will also offer you a short video later on. So really, we are going to have Q&A session later on, so I will try not to spend much of your time in order for as many of you as possible to express your thoughts. I think all of you know what is happening in Ukraine. You know the cruel war that Russia is waging against us. Harsh and violent. And actually, thanks to the fact that your university has Professor Timothy Snyder working with you, a prominent personality, a prominent historian, I think you can easily know all the details of why Russia has been acting the way it has been and why did they start exactly from Ukraine. I will explain the situation in general. For Russia, this is war not just to grab our land, not just to destroy our statehood, not just to spread the imperial influence. There's something more to it. With its terror, Russia tries to destroy something that has always been reborn in our people, in spite of all the wars we had, in spite of all the invaders that entered the land of ours, even in spite of this Kremlin-inspired genocide policy against the Ukrainians that the 20th century saw. One of its topmost manifestations was Holodomor, an artificial famine launched against the people. Ukrainians had to go through really horrible things, yet they have been able to retain their ability to stay unbowed, their will for freedom, their internal surety that it is the people who is the source of power on any land, not the Tsar with its throne, not a power, not wealth, but people. And it's very important that Ukraine has the potential to defend this fundamental democratic spirit, not just for itself, but also for other people in our part of the world. This is where the real front line is, not just for Ukraine. The Tsar thrown against the will for freedom, the army of those who've been devoid of freedom since the time this current government went to power in Russia, against the defensive forces of those who surely know that freedom makes everyone stronger. We are really different on the battlefield in Ukraine now. Every Ukrainian military unit has guardian angels in the rear, people able to help with anything our servicemen might need. This is a constant direct link between the defense forces and the society. Can you see something like that in Russia? No, nothing like that. That direct link goes probably just through the televised propaganda of hatred. Meanwhile, our field commanders are completely free to make their own decisions during holding these military operations. They use this freedom deciding how to act in the most efficient way at any given moment. Meanwhile, Russian commanders are trembling in expectation of the orders from the top. And sometimes they spend months trying to comply with knowingly hopeless orders, sending their own people as cannon fodder to imminent deaths. After our defense forces liberate territories, the area sees mine clearing personnel, has repairmen, has other personnel that become busy trying to bring normal life to people. Meanwhile, the Russian flag they tried to instill on temporarily occupied territories was only the symbol of mass graves, torture houses, deportations, filtration camps, and total disrepair. You can just imagine that Russian invaders are taking Ukrainian books out of libraries to destroy them. They destroy everything that even remotely reminds about Ukraine. Already 51 Ukrainian universities suffered from Russian missile and artillery strikes. At checkpoints, infiltration camps, Russian soldiers make strip searches of people to identify even slightest symbols of Ukraine, tattoos or some national symbol. You can have a yellow and blue ribbon on your backpack, and this might be a valid reason for Russian military to detain, torture, or kill. There have been hundreds of thousands of such cases. Why? Because everything Ukrainian is a target in the crosshairs of Russia. Russia is fighting against freedom, destroying everything Ukrainian and the Ukrainians. This is how they perceive it in the Kremlin. They need to destroy the people and the freedoms. They don't believe they can subjugate Ukraine in the other way. This is why they addressed Iran, asking for weapons, although asking for those killer drones and missiles, because Russia has not enough terror means. And you can see where these Iranian drones are aimed at. These drones are aimed against power plants, boiler plants, transport means, even residential houses. They want to destroy everything Ukrainian, everything, every manifestation of Ukrainianship. And this is exactly the point where we see the strategic threat from the Russian aggression, because after Ukraine and everything Ukrainian, Russia will, in the same vein, try to destroy something Polish, something Georgian, everything that belongs to people on the vast territory from the north of Europe to Kazakhstan. This is why we say that it is important for the whole of the world to see that Russia loses this time in this war in Ukraine. When we gain victory for ourselves, we will gain it also for other people, for those whose freedoms are potentially under threat. And let me just show you a little video to better understand my words. this was the video to show what we are going to spare Ukraine and our part of the world when we get rid of Russian invaders. And we do hope for our security guarantee for all of us. This video was a picture of our survival under Russian terrorist strikes just throughout this month of October. Meanwhile, the full-scale war has been going on for 9 months. Dear friends, on behalf of the Ukrainian people, I'd like to thank your people for the support you've been providing our defense forces with. I'd like to thank your leaders, President Biden, both chambers of commerce, both parties at the Congress, public figures, business persons who share the feeling that it is important for Ukrainian democracy to stay strong. I'm very much sure that Russia has no chance of winning this war, destroying our people. But the sooner we stop Russia, the better and the stronger will be our cooperation. The more threats from Russia we have, the more and the deeper our interaction should be. The more escalation steps Russia commits, the more we will have to do our steps in response to defend our freedoms and our people. We should not step back, we should not put something on hold. We should not give Russia even the smallest hope that its terror can work. It is exactly right now in Ukraine where it is decided whether our part of the world will remain free and democratic. And this will ultimately identify the global fate of the democracy. It is for us to decide the future of the free world, not for Russia. Glory to Ukraine. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. President, before we go to the students and the senators for some questions, we were going to give Kayla Tausche of CNBC the opening question. And Kayla, I just wanted to mention to you, coming from the world of video production, that was just created overnight for this event. It's a unique video. Nobody on the planet has seen what you just saw before. That's the situation now in Kyiv, and it's very, very powerful and distressing. But sorry for the interruption, Kayla.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to the leadership at Yale for having me, for the esteemed diplomats and lawmakers who are joining us, and especially to President Zelensky for allowing me to be here to ask you these questions. I'll start with an impassioned plea that you made to the leaders of the G7 countries back in June to end the war by the winter. The winter is now approaching, and as the war goes on, everyone from progressive Democrats here in the US to public figures like Elon Musk have made their own suggestions about how the war should end. At this point, will the war end with a battle or a negotiation, and when?
Thank you. Negotiation after a battle.
Дуже дякую вам за це відео.
Thank you for your video as well, and for this really helps to communicate with the public. Yeah, fortunately, however tragic it might look, it cannot describe 100% what has been happening here. The reality is much harder, much horrible. And the reality is much horrible in many respects. So coming back to how to end the war, it's a complex thing because it depends on multiple factors. We've shown our resilience as the people. We continue. We are motivated by being the Ukrainians, by being the citizens of this country, from different walks of life, from different nationalities, but we are motivated with what we have, and we defend what we have. This is what depends on us. This is our end target, and we are going there. It is also very much dependent on our partners. I've spoke thanking the leaders of your country, the Road Party, the opposition. I'd like to take the chance to also thank your colleagues, the journalists, those who have been communicating the stories and making sure that the public, the society, does not forget about the war. This really translates into support which needs to be. It is also depending on the public in the Russian Federation, and for this, a powerful sanction-based pressure should be exerted on Russia. For them, in Russia, also to understand that they also are responsible for the political choice of the political leaders who decided to bring terror to the land of my country. So many factors are at play. And this all is united in just one principle, the principle of willingness. Willingness, when we all will be willing to end the war, it will end. And it will end soon, probably. It all depends on how willing we are, on our inner motivation. Now all of us are Ukrainians, because it is the Ukrainians who are fighting for the values in Europe, in the US, in Asia, in Africa, everywhere. In every country that deems itself a civilized country, a civilized society, a civilized democracy. So this depends on our joint will.
Thank you, Mr. President. Kayla, any response on that? Certainly, you heard it here first. The headline is going to end soon. I heard that.
Yes, but President Zelensky, you have said that you will negotiate, but not with Mr. Putin directly. So are you suggesting that there should be a different channel of negotiations, or are you suggesting that the West should push for regime change?
Знаєте, мені в цілому вже складно сказати, хто такий.
You know, it is increasingly challenging for me to tell who or what is President Putin. Now it looks like this is like a bunch of individuals under the brand of Putin.
That's true, actually.
Who pursue aggressive steps. So we are not ready to talk to Putin. We are not to talk in general with a regime like this, with an approach like this, with this disrespect to sovereignty, to the freedom of our citizens, to our choice, to our territorial integrity. And the disrespect is demonstrated in a very clear way. There are military guys who are in our territories, within our borders, and they're killing here. So the first step should be get away from our land, from our territories. Another thing, it depends on how you're going to leave the country. Are you expecting us to push you from here? This will be one thing, and this will make for one format of the dialogue, if it happens, if it is possible. Another thing is when one goes voluntarily away, then it may be another sort of transition from war towards diplomacy. And I think it depends more on the military and political leadership of Russia, the Russian Federation. What the choice is. And unfortunately, this is not the choice they made for us, because for us, they've reserved the extermination. This is the form of dialogue that they have to choose for their own public, for their own society. Just they have to think for how long their society will be de facto isolated from the rest of the world. For a decade, couple of decades, for 1,000 years or 100. They have their hands in blood, and it will be really a challenge to clean those hands. They have children's blood on their hands.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to, if we can find the student, if you guys have the mic runners can locate in the room, because all we see are lights in front of us. Alexandra Baker Brown, if you're here, can you find her? I think it looks like you're finding her. Alexandra's a first-year MBA from San Francisco. I think a Berkeley econ major. Alexandra, we find you?
President Zelensky, thank you so much for being here with us today. The Ukrainian military and civilians have shown absolutely remarkable resolve and tenacity in the face of the Russian invasion. How have you maintained a spirit of optimism and motivated the Ukrainian people in the face of the invasion and the atrocities that they have undergone?
Thank you, Alexandra.
Дякую за запитання. Щоб надавати.
Thank you for the question. You know, to bring optimism to someone, you have to be optimist yourself. And I'm the optimist. I do believe in my own country, my family, my people, in our servicemen. And I think patriotism is also optimism combined with the belief in your own country, in your own nation. So for me, my nation is the best. In the same way, your nation is the best for you, for everyone at this home. And it's nice. This way we respect each other and we are patriots of our own nations, and this is a good thing. And there is optimism in that. Some might say that, you know, the grass is always greener on the other side, or maybe in the other nation. I conversely think that it may be beautiful elsewhere, but my country, my homeland is the best, which makes the best motivation for me. And I try to impart this energy to everyone I talk to everyone I communicate, to the people in my country, including the servicemen, the military, and people in different sectors, because really the country is defended by just everyone. So our key motivation is our home. We have no other home. But again, just pay attention that we are not going or waging war against any other country or nation. We don't need anything from else. We just defend what is ours.
Well, thank you. Just as an aside, as you mentioned, grass being always greener, the agricultural triumphs in the midst of having the railways bombed, the silos bombed, people planting fields, sowing the seeds, and then harvesting, despite the rain not being so great right now. It's a bumper crop in Ukraine that's approaching. In fact, what Russia produces, and same with the U.S. and Canada, there's a food problem, a famine problem that's possible, certainly a drought problem in Africa that's horrific, a 7-year problem. It's not caused by Ukraine. It's a food distribution problem the whole rest of the world has to take on, and I just want to mention that as the grass always greener, President Putin's trying to blame Ukraine or the West for attention. We need to focus on Africa. Jay Rosenberg, are you here? Jay is, I think, a first-year MBA, Boston College?
Yes, sir.
Vanguard star?
Former Vanguard, yes, sir.
Yes.
Mr. President, thank you for your time, your sacrifice, and the willingness to answer our questions. In this war, as I mentioned, you and other Ukrainians have sacrificed their well-being, safety, and for many, ultimately their lives in the name of freedom. What do you say to convince political leaders and citizens of other nations to make a sacrifice, even a small one, in order to further contribute to your cause so that you and your people may find victory and peace?
I'm so sorry. I think I didn't have correct translation. I think I don't hear in English.
Do you want to just ask it again?
Just repeat. Maybe
Yes,
I
sir.
don't have.
You and your citizens have made...
Could you ask it in Ukrainian?
Did you see? I
Yes.
No, it was no, sorry.
You and your citizens have made a significant sacrifice. And I ask you, what do you say to convince political leaders and citizens of other nations to make a sacrifice, even a small one, in order to further contribute to your cause and the cause of the Ukrainian people, so that you may find victory and peace.
You did better the second time. Thank you. How do you convince world leaders, political leaders, to care?
Щоб переконати їх піти на якісь маленькі жертви.
Дякую за запитання чи за два запитання або навіть.
Thank you for the question. Two questions, maybe even three questions. Let offer you one answer. I want you to understand it real clear. I don't think that the fact that we defend Ukraine, that we are doing this as a sacrifice, it is not quite like this. This is not a sacrifice. This is our responsibility because we really love our country. And you defend your country, you defend your love to it in the same vein as you would defend your family or maybe your beloved one. So this is not a sacrifice when you have to defend something or somebody you can't live without. So we are not sacrificing anything. We are just defending what we love. As regards leaders that I'm convincing, now the story looks a bit different. Now we do sacrifice our lives for the life of other nations. We do respect them, but we love our own nation. And other leaders have to understand when we are no longer able to stand in defense, the enemy will go to them, to their nation, and it will be them who will have to spend their lives defending what is dear to them. So from their side, it is not a sacrifice either. It's the assistance for us to keep the peace for them, for other nations. If my understanding of your question was correct. Sorry if I answered another question.
Thank you. I think that was an excellent explanation as we understood the question. Liu Xiaoxiu is Liu Xiaoxiu. You can find out. There we are, right here. Second year MBA.
Hello. Thank you, President Zelensky. It's very nice to meet you on Zoom. My name is Lin Xiaoxu. I'm a second year student at SOM. So my question is, what is your opinion of Chinese leader Xi's third term and the political impact of CCP to Ukraine people, ceasefire, and the rebuilding of Ukraine? Thank you.
Дякую за запитання. А що я думаю?
Thank you for the question. Regarding the third term, I think it would be beyond my capacity. This is quite a long time. As regards just my attitude, if you will, I mentioned it once. I would really like to see that Chinese society, Chinese public, and Chinese government support the Ukrainian country. We have a history of positive, in-depth relations, also economic ones. The biggest exchange, economic exchange, goods exchange, before the war was between, in Ukraine was with China. And I would really like to see these relations continue, particularly in the time when we have problems, we have budget deficit, and I would really like to see that Chinese position regarding support of Ukraine is much more clear. I definitely would not want this country to go supporting and defending Russian aggressive regime. This is my only wish.
Well, thank you. It is noteworthy that at the outbreak of war, despite the equivocation, if not apparent Putin leading of President Xi Jinping, is that in fact the largest petrochemical companies in China, which are among the largest in the world, Sinopec and Sinochem, immediately cut off all ties with the outbreak of war. Similarly, the largest financial institutions, probably larger than any institutions most of you will work for or even use, the Bank of China and ICBC, which is bigger than anybody in New York, cut off all lending, all ties with China immediately at the outbreak of war. So it's not what you would expect. I'd like to hear from Senator Blumenthal. We go to the two senators at this point as we take a look at enlisting the support of political leaders. Certainly, you heard a few responses from President Zelensky on how the appeal and the self-interest of other nations should be recognized here. But we do have dissent within each of our major political parties that we hear from time to time. Senator Blumenthal, any views on how things have changed since your visit to Kyiv in July?
Thank you so much, Jeff Sonnenfeld, and to Yale. I'm a very proud graduate of Yale Law School, but coming to you from Quinebaug Valley Community College in Danielson, Connecticut, where there is a very, very large concentration of American veterans who have fought for our freedom, just as your brave, fierce fighters in Ukraine, President Zelensky, are fighting for your homeland. And very simply, we are in awe, immensely grateful, but awestruck by your courage and strength, as I have told you on the 2 occasions this year that I have visited with my colleague, Senator Graham, and most recently in July. I want to thank Senator Graham particularly for his leadership. As you know, when we visited you, President Zelensky, we presented you with the resolution passed unanimously by the United States Senate. Senator Graham and I led it to declare Russia a state sponsor of terrorism, which would mean, if the administration follows it, that Russia would be one of the pariah states, a handful of states like North Korea and Syria, who are sanctioned, they are vulnerable to action in our courts, and it would be a real marker, and that's why we are working so hard to support you, because you are at the tip of the spear. You are defending our national security, because we know that Putin will keep going. He will continue to threaten NATO if he is permitted to conquer Ukraine. I would also remind you, when we spoke in July, you told us that there would be a counteroffensive, and there has been, and it is going very, very well. It has been successful beyond the expectation of many of our own military leaders. And you predicted also that you would need air defense in your country, because Putin would bomb, he would attack by drones your civilian facilities, schools, hospitals, power plant. And that is exactly what he is doing now, trying to, in effect, bloody the people of Ukraine, destroy its infrastructure, and thereby undermine its morale. And just yesterday, his speech was designed to divide our own nation. But let me tell you, President Zelensky, that in my view, and I think there's bipartisan support for this idea, there should be no negotiation without you and the people of Ukraine. You should be the one to decide when, whether, and where there can be negotiation. We should not pull back at this point. We should not be talking about diminishing our support. We should be redoubling our support, particularly when it comes to air defenses, so that your people are protected against this genocidal attack. When Senator Graham and I visited, we went to the mass graves in Bucha, and as heartrending and gut-wrenching as that video was, I will tell you, even more so were our visits to Bucha and the towns around Kyiv, and now we are uncovering more atrocities. Putin is a thug, he's a war criminal, he's committing genocide, and we must bring him to justice. So I want to close just by saying that, as you very correctly observe, freedom is not a thing. It's not a physical structure. It's not a power plant. Putin can bomb that. He can destroy that. But he cannot destroy your freedom as long as the people of the world are behind you, as they are now. And I would like to know from you, in addition to the artillery that we are providing, the kinds of long-range, multiple-launch artillery, and the drones and tanks, would you welcome better air defense, for example, against Belarus, better air defense against the Russian missiles and planes, the possibility of Patriot defense mechanism? And what I would suggest is that we take some of what we're sending to Saudi Arabia and redirect it, a halt to the arms to Saudi Arabia, redirect those arms to your country, which is right now defending the security of your people, but also that fight involves our own national security.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. Before, maybe, Mr. President, before you respond to that, as it might be nice, since you showed us how adroitly you could do a three questions at once. Why don't we try two at once? Because I saw Senator Graham nodding in agreement on those points. So maybe Senator Graham would like to add some additional perspectives to the points you made. And also, Senator Graham, if you would, of course, as you heard the prospective Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, depending how things work out in the next 11 days, said that perhaps the time of the blank check for military humanitarian support for Ukraine has passed. And how do you respond to that in light of what Senator Blumenthal just shared with us?
Well, number one, thank you for having me. This is probably as close as I'll ever get to attending Yale. The reason I didn't go is you wouldn't let me in. And you had admission requirements I couldn't meet, so congratulations for having high standards. President Zelensky, we're with you. So just hang in there, my friend. Things are going to work out here in Washington. A little bit about Dick. You know, we come from different political viewpoints on a lot of issues, but not this. I just want the people of Connecticut to know war is always a tough topic for anybody, but in democracies we tend to get weary and want to, have things over, and I can understand that. But no one has been stronger and more consistent in supporting Ukraine against the Russians' invasion than Senator Blumenthal. We have been created together, and I just want to tell you, my friend, there are 3 fronts in Washington. In July, I went with Dick to visit President Zelensky, and here's what I wanted to accomplish by the end of 2022. I want another aid package in the omnibus bill before the new Congress takes over. I want that aid package to be robust militarily and economically. And to my Republican colleagues, who don't want a blank check, that's fine. I'll be glad to sit down with you to make sure that the money goes where it should go, and we have accountability for the money. But I promise you, the majority of Republican senators are fully committed to seeing this through, because if we don't get Ukraine right, there goes Taiwan. And if we don't get Ukraine right, this war continues in Europe. So when it comes to Putin's invasion of Ukraine, you either pay now or you pay later. And we're lucky to have allies like the Ukrainians that are willing to fight for freedom. This is really a proxy fight in many ways. So I predict on this phone call that before the new Congress is sworn in, there will be a robust package of military and economic assistance to the Ukraine. I hope tanks are included so you can repel the invaders quicker. Number two, I hope in this package by the end of the year, we have Russia designated as a state sponsor of terrorism or something like it, to let the Russian leadership around Putin know that we're not going to forgive and forget, that we're going to keep in place sanctioned regimes, but we're going to up our game. We're going to put Russia in a club of 5. I think Iran's in that club of state-sponsored terrorism. And we want the business community who may be watching this program to know you do business with Russia at your own peril. The third thing we want to do is to make war crimes real. If we forgive and forget, if all the war crimes committed by Putin and his forces are just forgotten because we're so tired of dealing with this, then you're destroying the rule-based society that came out of World War II. I'm going to The Hague next week with a group of senators, bipartisan senators, to talk with the International Criminal Court prosecutor, Mr. Khan, about what we can do to change our laws to provide more evidence and intelligence to the ICC to hold Russian war criminals accountable, including Putin himself. So my message when it comes to Ukraine is more aid, more economic isolation of Russia, and more support for war crimes which are being committed before our eyes. The consequences of not getting this right are enormous. The war continues. Putin wants to reconstruct the old Russian Empire. That means democracies that exist today will not exist tomorrow if we give up on Ukraine. I think the Chinese are watching what to do about Taiwan. And if Putin is beaten here and he suffers mightily, then I think Taiwan is in better shape than if we lose. Iran is all in, helping Putin, and I want to make sure the Iranians understand they are supporting a loser. So I am very optimistic that the Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, at the end of this year and next year, will continue to give economic and military aid to the Ukrainian military and people so they can win a war we all can't afford to lose. How does it end? Russia withdraws to the 1998 boundaries. The Budapest Memorandum signed by Russia and Ukraine in 1998 was based on Ukraine giving up the third largest nuclear force in the world for a guarantee of their sovereignty by Russia, and we and others signed that agreement. If we let Putin get away with this, it'd be the biggest bait and switch of the 20th, 21st century. And the message will be, if you got nuclear weapons, you should never give them up. If you don't have nuclear weapons, you should probably get them. So what happens in Ukraine matters to all of us. And if you don't get that by now, you missed all of World War II.
Thank you, Senator Graham and Senator Whitcomb.
I can just second. I just want to second what Senator Graham just said about the need for another major package of aid before the end of the year. I would predict, and I think there'll be bipartisan commitment to that kind of major package of aid, which is why I asked especially about the air defense. But I agree with everything that Lindsay had just said. He said it better than I could. Obviously, my Yale degree didn't give me his eloquence. And, he's doing just fine.
Well,
thanks for your kind words.
You can pass it over to him next time you're together in the Senate, but we'll certainly give you, Senator Graham, a certification of contribution to this event. But I would like to also then go back to the President, if we could, President Zelensky. I think we just heard a headline
I hear my colleagues in Washington furiously typing up stories of
what's the headline you want to ask President Zelensky coming out of that?
Well, I think that it is clear that there is bipartisan support to move forward with more aid packages, more defenses, more economic aid. Of course, now the challenge is going to be keeping the lights on with Russian missiles targeting the power grid. 30% of Kyiv doesn't have power. So how do you craft a package that can reach these critical needs quickly enough? And how much, President Zelensky, does this package need to be? How much do you need?
I think he's doing the arithmetic right now.
You have a right to remain silent.
A lot. A lot.
Я не рахую чужі гроші.
No, I'm not counting. Particularly, it's not our money. But first of all, just to react to Senator's words, I'd like to start by thanking for the aid packages from the United States to Ukraine. And definitely I admire the unity in the Congress regarding that. I'm glad to hear, to see that Ukraine has been a contributing party to find, for two parties represented in Congress, in Senate, to find common ways of cooperation. But, going back to recent strikes, the key strikes of late, they were really about the energy infrastructure in Ukraine, and to be more exact, up to 40% of power-related infrastructure has been affected. So from 10th of October, we had not just Russian missiles, but also drones manufactured by Iran sent against us. We had 400 Iranian drones since 10th of October. And for the whole period of war, we've been with thousands of Russian missiles. Because of that, air defense matters are of priority, are of importance, because this is the key handicap for our people currently staying abroad that prevents them from going back home to see kids return to schools, universities. We need to defend civilians, and from here, the aerial defense is a priority for us. As Senator mentioned it, Patriots, are of extreme priority for us, and you mentioned Patriots. If you would say, yes, we can give you Patriots, I would go myself to the US for them. It's really important for our people.
Сполучені Штати Америки допомагають Європі.
So how the whole system works in general, the United States assists us, Europe assists us, but the US definitely is the leader, trendsetter in this assistance. We had not enough artillery, 155 millimeters, not enough barrels, then US were trailblazing on that, and then others joined. That's why the US opened a window of opportunity for other European countries to support. Then the matter of tanks. Unfortunately, we haven't got any tanks from the US. We would love to see Abrams here, but if there would be a possibility, an opportunity, we already know the support that European countries could provide us with in terms of armored vehicles, tanks, etc. But again, the topmost priority is aerial defense. We have to defend our skies. If my memory serves me right, I've been telling that in the first days of the war, aviation and aerial defense. This is what we lack. We need to defend our skies, to defend our children. Russian can do nothing against us on land.
Thank you, Mr. President. This has, of course, been the fastest hour of my life and perhaps of yours as well. It's a great frustration. We have time for just one last quick one. If Tanya Tsunik is here, Tanya, oh, right up front. How about that? Very impressive. Tanya is a Yale College student. Tanya, what country are you from?
I'm from Ukraine.
What coincidence? I have no idea. Quick final question.
Yeah, President Zelensky, thank you so much for your time. I'm Tanya. I'm from Ukraine, small town of Pershatravensk in Dnipro region. And I just wanted first to say how truly proud I am that such a president represents Ukrainian people. It's a president we deserve, and I think you are the president who deserves to represent us. And my question is, how, after this war is won, and after Ukraine wins, how do you imagine the reconstruction and the reformation of Ukraine? And when I say the reconstruction, I mean both the immediate things that needs to be done on the ground locally, and also the reformation in the domestic politics and the international order in the international relations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you for your question. Please, you are from Dnipro region, right? I am from there. I hail from there. So we share the same small homeland. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure indeed. I'm proud to see students like you representing Ukraine in the United States and elsewhere in the world. It's very important. You know, the rebuilding, the recovery of our nation, we need to do everything to see students like you who currently represent our country abroad, for them, for you to have an opportunity and also the desire to come back and chip in, participate in this recovery. So we need to do the recovery in a way that will be not just be based on patriotism, you know, or your t-shirt color. I do see that you are patriotically minded. I think it should not be just about patriotism, but also it should be based on a big desire to build a country for yourself, the way you'd like it, for your friends, for your kids, for many generations to come. So the recovery of Ukraine is a big program we have. The first iteration was presented in Lugano conference. And then we had a conference on the recovery of Ukraine in Berlin. Then we are going to have a conference in Britain. So I'm very much sure that at some point we will reach the US with our conference. But this is not just a matter of money. It's a matter of best practices, best experiences, best IT software, best scholars, best architects coming back to restore the country. We cannot go back just to the country we used to see and have before the war. We will have to reconsider it. First of all, the security. The security should be not just at the border. It should be upgraded and reviewed, but also inside the country. We'll have to live in different circumstances, in different conditions. We'll have to live with Russia on the other part of the border, with understanding what they're capable of. And because of that, we'll have to build a strong security system, including in schools, in hospitals, in other institutions, in shops. Second part, education. We are switching just to this. First, because of COVID, now because of the war, we've learned how to learn and study online, how to open businesses online, how to retrain and get another profession online, how to get another education online. It it is cool to be able to socialize that way. It would be not cool to live online, but the opportunities that online capacities offer are good. And we see most of our public services already been offered online because of COVID, because of war, but also because of people's desire to live in the world of topmost, most progressive technologies, with less governmental influence, with less red tape, with more online opportunities. So we've become a technological savvy state already now, and practically all of the public services have been already digitized in the country. This is important, and this is another priority. Next, high level of, I would say, simplicity of doing business, because Ukraine is trending now for a variety of reasons, because of war, lots of negatives related to war, because of the loss of life and so on. On the other hand, the world has discovered Ukraine because of it, and we need not to lose on that trend. We need to capitalize on that respect of Ukraine. Also, in business terms, we need to see more businesses coming out in the country. And for that, business making, the doing of business in Ukraine should be simple, comprehensible, because without investments, we won't be able to build our country. Still more, the enemy robbed us of billions. And also it will create a platform for students, for science development. We paid less attention to our science for almost 30 years of our independence. And we need to do everything to see you and others like you to gladly come back and rediscover Ukraine. We have to do everything for that.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And